Landlord and lodger contract. Key aspects and legal considerations. Presentation overview. Introduction to landlord and lodger contract. The landlord and lodger contract is an important legal document that outlines the rental agreement between a landlord and a tenant. It is important to understand the key elements of this contract to ensure a smooth tenancy. Key elements of the contract. The key elements of the landlord and lodger contract include payment, tenant responsibilities, and utilities. Understanding these elements is crucial to maintaining a good tenant-landlord relationship. Legal considerations and terminating the contract. The landlord and lodger contract has legal considerations that must be adhered to. It is also important to understand the process for terminating the contract and resolving disputes should they arise. Introduction to landlord and lodger contract. Importance of having a contract. Having a landlord and lodger contract is important because it sets out the terms and conditions of the agreement between the landlord and the lodger, which can help avoid disputes later on. Benefits of having a contract. The benefits of having a landlord and lodger contract include protecting both parties' rights, clarifying responsibilities and obligations, and providing a framework for resolving disputes. What is a landlord and lodger contract? The landlord and lodger contract is a legally binding agreement that outlines the expectations and responsibilities of both the landlord and the lodger. It includes details such as the rent amount, the duration of the lease, and the responsibilities of the tenant. It is important to have a written contract to avoid any misunderstandings between the parties. Why do you need a landlord and lodger contract? A landlord and lodger contract provides legal protection for both the landlord and the lodger, ensuring their rights and interests are protected in case of any disputes or misunderstandings. Key elements of a landlord and lodger contract. Payment and rent. The payment and rent section of a landlord and lodger contract outlines the amount of rent to be paid, payment due dates, and consequences of late payment or non-payment. Tenant responsibilities. The tenant responsibilities section of a landlord and lodger contract outlines the tenant's obligations, such as keeping the premises clean, not causing disturbances, and complying with local laws and regulations. Utilities and services. The utilities and services section of a landlord and lodger contract outlines who is responsible for paying for utilities and services like water, electricity, gas, and internet, and what services are included in the rent. Payment and rent amount. The rent amount should be clearly stated in the lease agreement. Payment due dates. The lease agreement should specify payment due dates and how payments should be made. Late payment penalties. The lease agreement should clearly state any penalties for late payment of rent. Deposit. The lease agreement should specify whether a deposit is required and the amount of the deposit. Tenant responsibilities. Tenants are responsible for keeping the property clean and in good condition, following the rules and regulations and not causing any damage to the property. These responsibilities are usually defined in the rental agreement or lease contract. Utilities and services. Included utilities. The rent contract should specify which utilities are included in the rent payment, such as electricity, gas, and water. Additional services. The contract should indicate who is responsible for paying any additional services apart from the utilities mentioned, such as internet, cable TV, or phone. Legal considerations. When creating a landlord and lodger contract, some of the key legal considerations that should be taken into account include the rental payment terms, security deposit requirements, rights and responsibilities of both parties, maintenance and repair obligations, termination clauses, and eviction procedures. Legal requirements. Compliance with laws. The contract must comply with local and state laws to ensure that both parties are protected and that the agreement is legally binding. Protection of rights. The contract should include clauses that protect the rights of both parties, such as confidentiality, indemnification, and limitation of liability. Dispute resolution. The contract should specify the process for resolving disputes, such as arbitration or mediation, to avoid costly and time-consuming litigation. Termination of the contract. Termination clause. The contract should contain a termination clause that specifies the circumstances under which the contract can be terminated, such as non-payment of rent or violation of the lease agreement. Notice period. The contract should also specify the notice period required for termination. This will ensure that both parties have adequate time to prepare for the termination of the contract. Dispute resolution. The contract should specify the dispute resolution process to be followed in case of any conflict. It should clearly outline whether mediation, arbitration, or any other conflict resolution method will be used. Conclusion. The landlord and lodger contract is a vital document that provides clarity and protection for both the landlord and the lodger. It outlines the terms of the tenancy, including rents, security deposits, and utilities. Thank you.